The air inside the tribunal chamber shimmered with soft blue light, flowing in slow waves across the high ceiling like a frozen ocean. Tall pillars of silver-white crystal lined the circular hall, each one etched with symbols that glowed faintly, recording every word, every motion, every decision made within those walls. Hundreds of beings filled the rising tiers of seats, their shapes and colors wildly different, yet all of them silent with anticipation. At the center of the chamber stood a single platform of dark glass. On it stood Captain Elias Ward of the United Earth Defense Fleet. Magnetic restraints circled his wrists, more for tradition than necessity. The Cathari guards nearby knew he could not overpower them in this place, but ceremony mattered to them. Elias stood straight anyway, shoulders back, chin up, as if he were attending a formal inspection instead of an interstellar legal proceeding. He looked tired, but not afraid. Above him floated a ring of light, the translation halo, turning every sound into words each species could understand. Directly ahead, elevated on a crescent-shaped dais, sat the Cathari High Court. The Cathari were tall, willowy beings with smooth, pearl-gray skin and long, luminous eyes. Their movements were slow and graceful, their expressions controlled. To them, emotional display in public was considered primitive. Today, however, even they seemed tense. A voice, calm and layered with faint harmonic undertones, filled the chamber. Proceed with the disposition of the captured war asset designated human military officer Elias Ward. Elias blinked once. War asset, that was what they called him. A guard to his left tapped a glowing panel. A projection appeared above the platform, showing a star system with several planets marked in red. Captured during the border engagement at the Hadron Expanse, the voice continued. Rank? Captain. Role: Tactical Command and Advisory. Notable for high survival rate of assigned personnel. A few murmurs rippled through the audience tiers. The Cathari respected competence, even in enemies. Under Combine Law, the voice said, sentient prisoners of conflict may be placed under contract ownership. Bidding privileges are open to recognized citizens of standing. Elias exhaled slowly through his nose. He had heard the explanation already. Twice. It still didn't make sense to him. To the Cathari, this was civilized, humane even. Instead of prisons, captured beings were purchased into households, research institutions, or political estates. They were given food, shelter, purpose. They were also property. The first bid came from a squat, four-armed being in the lower tiers. A soft chime rang out as a number flashed in the air, a column of glowing symbols that the translator rendered as currency. Another chime answered from across the chamber. The number doubled. Elias watched the floating figures with distant disbelief. He had seen auctions before, in history lessons, in old documentaries about the worst parts of Earth's past. He had never imagined standing in one. More bids appeared. Each higher, each met with polite, interested silence. No one asked what he wanted. Current bid has reached a state-tier valuation, the court voice announced. Further increments must meet or exceed high nobility threshold. The murmurs grew louder. Then the chamber doors at the far end opened. Every sound died instantly. A Cathari woman entered, flanked by two attendants who remained several steps behind her. She did not hurry. She did not need to. Her presence moved through the chamber ahead of her like a change in gravity. Her skin held a faint golden sheen instead of the usual pearl gray, and thin lines of light traced delicate patterns along her temples, marks of genetic and political lineage. Her robes were deep blue, threaded with living fibers that shifted like starlight when she walked.
High Executor Thalira, the court voice said, and for the first time, there was the slightest note of deference.
Even Elias, who knew almost nothing about Cathari politics, could tell she was important. She stepped into a private bidding circle near the front. A transparent console rose to meet her hand. She didn't look at Elias right away. Instead, she studied the projection above him. reading his service record, battle history, psychological profile. Her eyes flicked up to him at last. Elias met her gaze. Hers was cool, analytical. His was steady, guarded. She placed her long fingers against the console. A tone rang out, deeper than the others, heavier. The floating number above Elias's head exploded into a string of symbols so long the projection had to widen to fit it. The chamber gasped as 1. Even without knowing exact values, Elias understood the reaction. That wasn't just a bid. That was a statement. The previous bidders withdrew immediately, their symbols vanishing from the air. The court voice paused before speaking again. Bid recognized.
High Executor Thalira has entered a Sovereign Tier acquisition. Sovereign Tier.
That sounded final. Thalira stepped forward from her circle and approached the central platform. The guard shifted but did not stop her. She stopped just beyond the edge of the dark glass, close enough that Elias could see faint reflections of the chamber lights in her eyes. Up close, she was taller than he expected, and very, very calm. She studied him openly now, head tilted slightly, as if examining an unusual piece of art. "You understand the situation you are in," she said. Her voice was smooth, perfectly controlled, the translator giving it a soft, almost musical tone.
"I understand you think I'm equipment,"
Elias replied.
A faint ripple passed through the audience. Speaking out of turn was not standard behavior. Thalira did not react with anger. If anything, her eyes sharpened with interest.
"Not equipment," she said. "Personnel asset."
Skilled. Rare.
"Still not better," he said. She glanced briefly at the hovering number above him, then back to his face. "I have placed a value on you," she said. "One that exceeds the annual resource output of several minor worlds."
You would reside in my household. You would be maintained in health and comfort. Your skills would be used with purpose. Elias gave a short, humorless laugh.
"You're pitching it like a job offer." "In many ways it is," she said. "Do I get to quit?" A pause.
Ownership contracts are lifelong. Yeah, he muttered. That's not a job. Another murmur rolled through the tiers. Thalira took one more step closer to the platform's edge. Her voice lowered slightly, though the chamber could still hear every word. She looked him directly in the eyes and asked, "Is this enough to buy you?" The question hung in the glowing air between them. Around them, hundreds of beings leaned forward, waiting for the human to finally understand his place. Gratitude would be acceptable. Relief, even better. Submission would be ideal. Elias just stared at her. Buy me? For a second he wondered if this was still a translation error. Maybe the word meant something softer in her language. Maybe it meant sponsor, employer, guardian. But no. He had read the cultural briefings during the long months of first contact. It meant exactly what he thought it meant. He looked up at the giant number again. Enough money to build cities, to feed planets, to buy fleets. Then he looked back at her, his brow furrowed, not in fear, but in confusion. Then, in mild offense, "Buy me?" he said slowly. "Lady, I'm not for sale." The translation halo carried his words across the chamber. Silence followed. Not polite silence, not thoughtful silence, stunned silence. Several beings in the audience made sharp, involuntary sounds before catching themselves. One of the Cathari judges actually leaned forward, hands tightening on the edge of the dais. Refusal was not part of this process. Assets did not decline purchase. Prisoners did not correct nobility. Thalira did not look embarrassed. She did not look angry. She looked surprised. "You are a prisoner of war," she said, her voice still calm but now edged with something sharper. "Under Combine law, your status permits transfer of ownership?" "Yeah," Elias said. "That's your law." A ripple of disapproval moved through the upper tiers. "And you are within our jurisdiction," she said. Still doesn't make me an object, he replied.
You would prefer to remain unowned? She asked. I'd prefer to be free, he said.
Failing that, I'll settle for not pretending this is normal. The court voice cut in, slightly louder than before. Human Elias Ward, you are advised to moderate your tone. You address a high executor. Elias didn't look away from Thalira. With respect, he said, I don't belong to her. Or you, or anyone. A Kethari in the audience whispered, not quietly enough. Delusional. Thalira lifted one slender hand, and the whispering stopped instantly. She studied Elias as if he had just become far more complicated than his file suggested. You reject material security, she said slowly. Status, protection, influence. I reject being owned, he said. Even if your refusal changes nothing about the outcome?
Elias shrugged as much as the restraints allowed. Then at least I didn't help you pretend it was okay. Another long pause. The great chamber, built for ceremony and order, now held something unfamiliar. Uncertainty. Thalira finally straightened. She did not withdraw her bid. The glowing number still hovered above Elias like a price tag on a shelf. But her next words were quieter, thoughtful, fascinating, she murmured. Then, louder for the court to hear, the human has spoken. Record his refusal. Gasps rippled through the chamber again, not as loud as before, but more unsettled. Elias blinked. That was not what he expected. Thalira turned slightly, addressing the high court without taking her eyes off him. It appears, she said, we are not merely negotiating a transfer of property. Her gaze returned fully to Elias Ward, human captain, asset. It seems, she said, we are negotiating with a person. And for the first time since he'd been captured, Elias felt like someone in power had actually heard him. The silence that followed Thalira's words did not fade quickly. It stretched across the great chamber, heavy and uncomfortable, like a truth no one wanted to touch. Elias Ward stood on the dark platform, wrists still bound in glowing restraints, but something had shifted. A few moments ago, he had been a valuable object. Now he was a problem. The High Court conferred in low, layered tones that hummed through the air. Symbols flickered above their crescent-shaped dais as legal references and cultural codes were pulled from ancient archives. The Cathari were a species that believed in order, in systems that had lasted for thousands of cycles. Humans, it seemed, did not fit neatly into those systems. High Executor Thalira remained at the front of the chamber. Her posture was calm, but her attention never left Elias. She was studying him the way a scientist might study a strange new element that did not react the way it should. Human Elias Ward, the court voice said at last. You have verbally refused lawful acquisition. Clarify your reasoning for the record. Elias let out a slow breath. He had not expected to be asked for reasoning. He had expected punishment, maybe sedation. Maybe removal. Instead, they wanted an explanation. Because I'm a person, he said simply, not a tool. Not livestock. Not a collectible. A few Cathari in the upper tiers shifted in visible discomfort. The comparison to animals was clearly offensive to them, though he doubted they understood why it sounded just as bad to him. You acknowledge you were captured during armed conflict? The voice asked. Yes. You acknowledge that under Combine law, captured personnel may be placed into structured service under ownership contracts? I acknowledge that's what your law says, Elias replied. I don't agree that it's right. A sharper murmur rolled through the chamber. Disagreeing with the law in open court was rare. Doing so as a prisoner was almost unheard of. Thalira spoke before the court could respond. Explain the basis of your disagreement. Elias looked at her. Back home, we had systems like this. A long time ago. People owning people. We fought wars over it. Tore countries apart. Millions died. He swallowed once, jaw tight.
We decided it was wrong, not inefficient, not outdated.
Wrong. The translation halo carried the weight in his voice perfectly. For what reason was it deemed wrong? Thalira asked. Because people aren't things, he said. You can't measure a person's worth in numbers and then transfer them like cargo. Doesn't matter how comfortable the cage is. A low hiss of indrawn breath passed through some of the Cathari. The word cage did not translate cleanly, but the emotional context did.
One of the judges leaned forward. Human Combine ownership does not equate to cruelty. Owned beings are protected, housed, and given purpose.
Elias nodded once. I believe you. I don't think you're trying to be monsters. I think you just don't see us the same way we see ourselves. And how do humans see themselves? Thalira asked.
He gave a tired half-smile. Complicated. Stubborn. But free. Even when we're not, we still think we should be. That answer made several Cathari exchange glances. Thalira began to circle the platform slowly, hands clasped behind her back. Your military records show repeated instances of you placing yourself at risk to extract injured personnel, she said. Even when doing so, lowered your own chance of survival. That's called not leaving people behind, Elias said. Those personnel were under your command authority, she said. They were, in a sense, yours to direct. They weren't mine, he corrected. They trusted me.
Big difference? Big difference. She stopped walking.
Trust, she repeated softly, as if testing the word. Yes. You believe trust is stronger than ownership. I know it is, he said. A faint flicker passed through the glowing patterns along her temples. Interest. Calculation. Records from other conflict zones show similar behavior among human captives, she said, now addressing the court as much as him. Refusal of high-status acquisition, coordinated resistance, attempts to assist other owned beings in escaping their contracts.
Elias frowned.
Yeah, that sounds like us. You speak of this with pride, a judge observed. Yeah, Elias said again.
I do. The chamber stirred, unsettled by the lack of shame. Thalira turned back to him.
You understand that such actions destabilize lawful society within the Combine.
Freeing people tends to do that, he said. A few guards stiffened, but Thalira lifted a hand slightly and they relaxed. You are not physically imposing by Cathari standards, she said. Your species lacks natural weapons. Your technology, while innovative, is not superior to ours. Yet reports described humans as difficult to contain.
Ooh. Elias shrugged. We don't like being told we're property.
Makes us creative. A faint sound passed through Thalira's throat. It took the translator a moment to render it. Amusement. The court reacted with visible surprise. He stepped closer again, studying his face.
When I asked if my offer was enough to buy you, you appeared confused before you appeared offended. Why? Because for a second, he said, I thought maybe something got lost in translation.
That maybe you meant hire or recruit or sponsor, not own.
And when you realized I did not, I figured we had a bigger problem than money, he said. And what problem is that? You think people can be bought, Elias said.
We don't. A long pause followed. Everyone has a price, one of the judges said flatly. Elias shook his head.
No, everyone has needs. Food.
Safety. Family.
You can use those to pressure people, but that's not the same as a price.
Distinction unclear, the judge replied. It's the difference between choosing and being forced, Elias said. If I work with you because I believe in what you're doing, that's cooperation. If I work for you because you bought the right to control my life, that's not choice. Thalira's gaze sharpened. If you were released without ownership, would you not still be influenced by those who provide resources and protection? Sure, he said. But influence isn't the same as chains. Several Cathari exchanged quiet signals through subtle light pulses along their skin. The human's logic was uncomfortable, but internally consistent. Thalira returned to the bidding console. The enormous number still hovered above Elias, glowing steadily. She placed her hand on the surface again. Another tone rang out. The number jumped higher. A wave of shock rolled through the chamber. The amount was now so extreme that it bordered on absurdity. Entire regional defense budgets could be funded with that wealth. Thalira looked at him again. "This is not symbolic," she said. "This is power. Influence. Security beyond threat. With this, your comfort would be absolute. Your voice within my domain would carry weight."
Elias stared at the new number, then back at her. "You're still trying to buy me?" "Yes," she said plainly.
"Still not for sale."
A muscle along her jaw tightened slightly. "Name a condition, then."
"A term under which you would accept my claim."
"I don't have a price,"
he said. "Everything has equivalent exchange," she said.
"Not dignity," he replied. That word translated poorly at first.
The halo cycled through several approximations. Status, internal worth, self-authority. None were exact. Thalira seemed to sense the gap. "Define," she said.
"It's the idea that I belong to myself," Elias said. "That my life is mine to direct. I can give my loyalty. I can give my service."
"But no one gets to own me. And yet," she said quietly, "you serve a government. Follow orders. Risk death at command." "Because I chose to," he said. "And I can walk away when my term is up. They don't own me either." "Your species permits withdrawal from military duty?" a judge asked, startled. "After your contract, yeah?" Elias said. "You can re-enlist or go home." The chamber buzzed with low conversation. Voluntary service on that scale was a foreign concept. Thalira looked at him for a long moment, then asked, softer now, "If your leaders commanded you to perform an act you believed was morally wrong, what would you do?" "Refuse," he said. "You would defy ownership of command?" "I'm not owned," he reminded her. "And yeah, humans argue with authority all the time." "Sometimes we get punished. Sometimes we change the rules." She considered that. "Your species sounds unstable," a judge muttered. Elias smiled faintly. "You're not wrong." A faint ripple of restrained amusement passed through a few sections of the chamber before being quickly suppressed. Thalira straightened. "Human Elias Ward," she said, voice carrying clearly. "You claim you cannot be bought. You claim personhood beyond valuation. You claim loyalty must be earned, not enforced." "Yeah," he said. "Then answer this," she said. "If released without ownership, what would you do?" He didn't hesitate. "Try to end the war." The chamber went still again. "You would return to your military," a judge said.
Eventually, Elias said, "But first I'd push for talks."
"Prisoner exchanges. Something better than this."
"You would assist your enemy?" the judge pressed. "I'd assist people who don't want to keep killing each other," he said.
"That includes you." Thalira watched him very carefully.
"Even after capture?" "After facing ownership? Yeah," he said. "Because if I only do the right thing when it benefits me, then it's not the right thing."
That answer lingered in the air. For a long time, no one spoke. Finally, Thalira lifted her hand from the bidding console. The massive number above Elias flickered. Then it vanished. Gasps echoed through the chamber. "I withdraw my claim," she said. Shock rippled through every tier. High Executor, one judge began. She raised her hand and the protest died. I cannot purchase a being who does not recognize the legitimacy of being purchased, she said. To do so would not create a loyal asset. It would create a permanent point of resistance within my own domain. Her eyes returned to Elias. And, she added, quieter, I find I do not wish to test which of those outcomes would prevail. Elias let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The restraints were still on his wrists. The war was still ongoing. He was still a prisoner, but for the first time since the battle at Hadron Expanse, someone with real power had looked at him and seen not a resource, but a man who could say no. The chamber did not return to normal after Thalira withdrew her bid. There was no normal left to return to. Light still flowed across the high ceiling. The crystal pillars still recorded every word. The judges still sat in their crescent formation. But the feeling in the room had changed. Something invisible had cracked. Captain Elias Ward still stood on the central platform, wrists circled in soft restraints. Yet now the glowing field above him was empty. No number, no price. That absence made everyone more uneasy than the largest bid ever could. The High Court spoke in layered whispers that vibrated through the air like distant music. Legal references flashed and vanished above them faster than most beings in the chamber could follow. They were searching for precedent. There wasn't any. Finally, the court's primary voice sounded again, measured and calm. High Executor Thalira, you have withdrawn a sovereign tier claim on a lawful war asset. Clarify your intent? Thalira stood with her hands loosely folded before her.
My intent is to avoid internal instability, she said. Ownership is most effective when the owned party accepts the structure.
This human does not.
Resistance can be corrected, one judge replied. Not always, she said.
And not without cost. Her gaze shifted briefly to Elias. He met it, expression steady.
Appetite waiting for another yesterday call. The judge continued. If not ownership, then what status do you propose for this being? A faint pause followed. Negotiating party, Thalira said. The word spread through the chamber like a shockwave. Elias blinked. Negotiating party? Several judges leaned forward at once. Clarify, one demanded. He has made it clear that coercion will not produce cooperation, Thalira said. However, he has also expressed willingness to pursue de-escalation between our peoples. Elias nodded slightly. Yeah, I did. You would elevate a prisoner to diplomatic relevance? Another judge asked, disbelief clear even through the translator. I would test whether voluntary alliance yields more than forced service, Thalira said. A low, tense debate erupted across the dais. Some judges' skin patterns pulsed in sharp, agitated flashes. Others remained dim and thoughtful. Elias stood quietly, heart beating faster now. This was moving far beyond his expectations. He had just tried not to get sold. Now they were arguing about turning him into some kind of envoy. One judge addressed him directly. Human Elias Ward, if granted opportunity to speak on behalf of your species, do you claim authority to do so? No, Elias said honestly. I'm not a politician. I'm not even that high rank. But I know how humans think. And I know how soldiers think. That counts for something. You admit lack of formal mandate, the judge said. Yeah, Elias replied. But I also know this war started from fear and bad assumptions on both sides. If nobody talks unless they have perfect authority, nobody talks at all. That statement triggered another wave of quiet discussion. Thalira watched the court, then spoke again. We are facing a species that does not respond to traditional containment. Reports from multiple sectors describe humans spreading ideas of self-ownership among already owned populations. Elias winced. Yeah, we do that. You destabilize lawful order, a judge said sharply. We destabilize slavery, Elias corrected. The chamber tightened again.
Thalira did not silence him this time. Instead, she asked, "If every human shares your view, why has your species not collapsed into chaos without ownership structures?"
Elias almost laughed.
"Oh, we've had plenty of chaos. Still do."
But we run on agreements, not chains. Laws we argue about.
"Leaders we replace. It's messy, but it works better than cages. Your confidence in this system is statistically unsupported at galactic scale," a judge said. "Maybe," Elias said, "but it works for us, and when you try to force us into your system, we push back. Hard." That part at least matched the Combine's data. Thalira turned slightly toward him.
You stated earlier that loyalty must be earned. Explain how one earns the loyalty of a human. Elias thought for a moment. You treat them like a person. You keep your word.
You stand with them when it's hard, not just when it's convenient.
And if conflict of interest arises, she asked.
Then we argue, he said, maybe even fight. But it's still a relationship between people, not owner and property. The word relationship caused another ripple of translation delay. The concept carried emotional weight the Cathari language struggled to capture. A judge leaned forward.
If we release you without ownership, what guarantee do we have that you will not return with military force?
No guarantee, Elias said.
Just my word. That is insufficient, the judge replied.
Yeah, Elias agreed. It usually is, at first. A faint, almost imperceptible shift touched Thalira's expression. Interest again. She addressed the court. Consider the alternative. If we force ownership, we gain a resentful, resistant individual whose species already shows a pattern of organized defiance in captivity. If we attempt termination, we create a martyr and confirm every hostile narrative about us. Silence followed that. Elias had not considered the martyr angle, but he was glad she had. Thalira continued, if we instead engage on his terms, we risk deception. But we also open a path to understanding a species whose behavior we currently misinterpret. One judge asked, "You believe this single human is representative?" "No," she said. "I believe he is typical." Elias tilted his head. "That's both flattering and kind of insulting." A few beings in the chamber made soft, startled sounds at his casual tone. Thalira's eyes flicked to him, and for a moment there was something almost like restrained amusement again. "Human Elias Ward," she said, "you claimed earlier that if freed, you would still seek to help us avoid further war."
Why?
He answered without hesitation. Because dead soldiers on either side don't fix misunderstandings. They just make more families angry. The simplicity of the statement seemed to hit harder than a long speech. "You feel responsibility for non-humans?" a judge asked.
I feel responsibility for people, Elias said. Your people.
Just tall, glowy ones. A wave of quiet, confused reaction spread through the chamber at the casual description. Thalira studied him carefully. "If we acknowledged your personhood legally, you would expect the same for all humans in our custody?" "Yes," he said immediately, "and eventually for everyone else too." That last part sent a clear jolt through the judges. "You seek to alter combined societal structure," one said. "I seek to stop people being owned," Elias replied. "If that changes your system, maybe your system needs changing." The boldness of that statement could have ended the discussion right there.
Instead, Thalira asked, and if your own species encountered a civilization that owned humans as property? Elias's jaw tightened.
"We'd fight hard until they stopped or we couldn't anymore."
Even if it meant extinction? She asked.
He met her gaze. Yeah. No hesitation.
No theatrics. Just fact. That answer settled over the chamber like gravity increasing. The Cathari valued survival above almost everything. A species willing to risk extinction over principle was not just strange. It was dangerous, and, in some quiet way, admirable. Thalira turned back to the court.
We are not debating the value of ownership as a tradition. We are confronting a species for whom ownership is an existential threat.
Continued enforcement will ensure perpetual conflict. Conflict is already present, a judge said. Yes, she replied, but it may not need to be permanent. She paused, then added, he offered dialogue in exchange for recognition of personhood. That is not a demand for dominance. It is a request for mutual standing.
Elias nodded. I don't want to run your empire. I just don't want to be inventory in it.
Another long silence followed. Finally, the court voice spoke, slower than before. If we accept this reframing, we must create a new legal category, one not bound by ownership statutes. Correct, Thalira said.
That act will have ripple effects beyond this single case.
Yes, she said again. You are prepared to bear responsibility for those consequences? She did not hesitate.
I am.
The chamber grew still. Elias realized he was watching history bend.
The court voice shifted. Human Elias Ward, if granted provisional recognition as an autonomous individual rather than property, you will be subject to diplomatic containment protocols.
You will not be free to move without supervision. You will not transmit unsanctioned communications.
Do you accept these terms as an alternative to ownership?
Elias considered. Not freedom, but not slavery either. I accept, he said.
As long as the end goal is real talks, not just a nicer cage. Terms noted, the voice replied. Thalira looked at him again, more directly than ever before. You understand that if you betray this trust, the argument for recognizing your species as sovereign individuals will weaken.
Yeah, he said. No pressure. Her eyes held his.
Why do I believe you will still try to do the right thing, even if it disadvantages you?
He gave a small, tired smile. Because I already am. For a moment, neither of them looked away.
Around them, the High Court began drafting the first legal language the Combine had written in millennia that did not assume some beings could be owned. And at the center of it all stood a human who had refused to have a price.